Well, hello and welcome. I am Nick Roan now, formerly Nick Kanoki, legal name change. I wasn't going to tell you until later, but there I slipped up and now you know. And excited to welcome you to today's program of ALN Thursday at 3. And this program continues our discussion of the revised ISO asset management standard. And so we'll get into that with Lindsay Ziegler and Lori Gray in just a moment. But before that, we want to thank our patron members, Jacobs, Mantech, Onuma, ABS Quality Evaluations, and CGI, as well as all our organizational members. And if you're out there wondering how we could work together, please reach out because we would like to partner with every organization in the world, if at all possible, to see how we can help improve your mission. And with that, we will just briefly talk about the ALN mission, because last week we started off the discussion with our vision statement, and we're really trying to redouble our efforts back to our core values here at the ALN. Mike, say more?
Yeah, well, our assets include our intellectual property, our experience, and our knowledge. And Nick, I was going to ask you about your name change. I think that's really significant and has impact. Can you tell us the story of your name change that you are still getting used to?
Yeah, right. Yeah, and as we were talking about, I still, there's still pieces of the process to be completed with my bank, et cetera. But yeah, process started with my partner and I deciding we didn't want to take each other's names kind of in the traditional sense and just picked a name of our own. And both my daughters share my last name, share this Roan last name. So excited to more specifically be a part of their family. And yeah, it was a bit of a harrowing process. If anyone needs help, talk to me.
Well, I think that is a wonderful act to do as a couple that you and Megan are doing this. It's more significant than following in the traditional patriarchy way. And your involvement in the ALN represents what I think is a younger view on the significance, importance of our actions as a collective society. And so I'm really glad that you're involved. And I think it's great that you do things such as signify your importance to each other by changing your names together. So
Yeah, and we like to talk about culture here at the ALN, and that's the last I'll say on it. Is it's a nice little cultural shift in our family to all have this same but a different last name.
yes. And you're right. The new versions of, oh, can you put the mission
Oh, yep,
statement?
sorry.
Uh, you're right in that the new revisions to the ISO asset management documents help us to redouble our focus on our vision, our missions, and our impact on culture. And last week we talked about vision, and this week we want to, share that our mission is to inspire people to action as leaders in creating and preserving sustainable value. And that's with any type of organization, government, or private. And that's why it's really wonderful that Lori Gray, who is with the government water and utility company, is joining us today with Lindsay Ziegler. And I've got to say that Lindsay is the convener of the U.S. Technical Advisory Group. She is to the ISO standard. She is not the convener of Work Group 6, as I mistakenly wrote in the newsletter, and I wanted to publicly clarify that that is her role. And Lori was a member of Work Group 6, and we're very happy that they're going to relate the reasons and the thoughts to the revisions. And I'll just let Lindsay and Lori talk about the work that they've been doing for the past year or more.
Well, thank you for the introduction, Mike. As Lori well knows, I like to talk, so I'll start. we had a lot of people ask, why are you bothering to revise the 55 standard? Now that just to review for everybody who is not 100% clear, there's three main standards. The 55000 is the why. Why do you want a management system for managing assets? The 001, which is the one Lori and I are going to talk about, is the what. It's what do you need to do to ensure that you have a proper management system for managing assets. And then later on, you'll have another group talking about these 55002, which is the how, and that is best practices and a lot of good information on ways to actually implement the things that you're asked to do in 55001. So we were asked, I've been asked personally, why did we bother doing a revision to 55001? The answer, I think, is the existing standard was 10 years old. It was published in 2014. And a lot has happened in the world in the last 10 years. Just tons of technology and advances in things like how we build and create and look at assets in particular, and also how we look at how we manage people and systems, and all of that goes into asset management, because you're not going to manage assets without managing your people. Ain't going to happen. So that's the reason is when 10 years have passed, you're going to have 10 years worth of potential changes to what it means to have a proper management system for managing assets. Now, the group that both Lori and I were part of, the work group 6, which was the one that was responsible for the 55001 update, was our convener was an amazing gentleman named Martin Kerr from Australia. And I don't know about you, Lori, but I would work with Martin again in a cold heartbeat. He set us out some guiding principles for the revision to 55001. It would have been real easy to add a gazillion new requirements to 55001. And we wanted to avoid doing that because, first of all, we don't want to discourage people from pursuing the standard. We don't want people to look at it and say, oh my gosh, that's too much. So as Martin said, we don't want to add too many new requirements, or the way he put it is less is more. We definitely followed the KISS principle, keep it simple, stupid. We were very cognizant of making things scalable so that it could apply to both small and large organizations. So all those things went into the work that has been put into 55001 over the 3-year period of development. Now, the requirements in 55001 are couched as what we call shall statements. So it says the organization shall do something. How many new shall statements do we have? Well, we have about 50 new shall statements in the revised standard. And the reason I say it's about 50 is because there's different ways you can count them, and not everybody agrees. So I'll give you a little example. I'm looking at a shall statement right here. It says the organization shall plan A, actions to address, treat, monitor, and communicate risks related to assets, asset management, and the asset management system, taking into account how these risks can change with time. And B, how to integrate and implement the actions into its asset management systems processes and evaluate the effectiveness of these actions. Now, you could look at that as one shall statement because the word shall only occurs once. Or you could say it's two because the organization shall plan A, actions to address, treat, monitor, and communicate, and how to plan, how to integrate and implement and evaluate. So that might be two. Or you could go even down to the granular level, and I don't know, that's at least 12 requirements there. So how you count it is it's in the eye of the beholder. Oh, um, thank you, Alex. I appreciate that. Alex just made a note in the chat that I appreciate greatly. Um, how you break that down depends on how you want to look at it. So that's one of the things that you kind of have to think about. Lori, you wanted to talk a little bit about, in particular, Martin's leadership.
Yeah, I thought just coming into the US tag back in Philly, getting to meet all of you, and with Martin, he made it very easy to understand, but then it was really warming on how, like, the whole country, we all came together, and sometimes levels would go a little high, but then Martin was really good about bringing the levels down. Again, less is more, guys, less is more, and knocking it out without demeaning anybody. It was really good. And then where we had difficulties, we would sit and ponder all night and then come back and say, okay, is this still how you want it? Does it still make sense to you guys? And then if it did, or if we needed changes, then we did so. So we did it in a more efficient way than how some meetings are held.
Well, I felt like it was very collegial, didn't you?
Yes. Yes,
Like,
most
I
definitely.
mean, we had people from all over the world in our working group working on this. And we also had people who called in periodically from wherever they were because they weren't able to make it physically to Philadelphia. And Philadelphia was the first in-person plenary we've had since the beginning of the pandemic. So it was quite a change and quite a challenge to make sure that happened. That was tough. But I know I was working with a subgroup that was working on a new section about data, and specifically, although that section doesn't say data as an asset, that's what it was about. It was about how you can manage your data that is an asset to the organization. And that's one of the things that's happened in the last 10 years. Data has become a huge, huge issue of, yes, this is an asset, and yes, it is important. And we had some wonderful input from a couple of different countries on fabulous things that you can do to manage your data as an asset. But several of the items there were really not. So a small organization would never have been able to do those things that we were saying was a requirement. So we had to pull those aside and say, those I think are best practices. And so rightfully, they probably belong in the new 55,002, the how. And so that was our plan, to take some of the things that were new requirements that were not something that a smaller organization was realistically going to be able to do, and put them into the best practices document so that larger organizations are going to look at that and say, oh yeah, we definitely have to do those things. And smaller organizations can look at that aspirationally. As we grow, we should think about moving towards this and this and this.
Lori brings an interesting perspective to the group by being involved in the Lansing Board of Water and Lights certification. You've got one building certified, so you had been through ISO 55,000 very intimately. Mm-hmm. What do you think that experience brought to the revision, Lori?
So learning and going through the 2014 as a practitioner, and getting to understand what asset management is, it was hard for us to really define and understand what were the major components of a SAMP? What were the major components that we needed within our objectives and within our AMPs? And what's the difference between the SAMP and asset management plans? So it was very rewarding going through this whole year and a half with everybody, because it really taught me to where I understand it, but yet now letting them know, hey, I'm one of the practitioners who didn't understand. So how many people don't understand? And now looking at the new standard, you can actually see these are the components of what we're looking for within a SAMP. These are the components that we're looking for within our objectives. And then also, it was very vague on decision making. You know, the decision making was always at clause 4. So you're thinking, oh, it's only in top management. Top management, you only need to look at clauses 4 through 5. And in the standard now, decision making is all the way around the house. So, and that's what even like 9001, where I came from, ISO isn't always top down. It's not always bottom up. It has to encompass the whole organization. And so I think with the new updates within the 2024 and seeing decision making and value aligned throughout the whole series really encompasses and brings that organization together. Because to me, when I look, and then within my eyes, it looked kind of like a silo, top management and the doers. And we've kind of put it all together, like everybody has a piece of the pie, not just 3 sections of the clauses.
Lindsay, I
Yeah,
see
and I
you
think-
nodding a lot there. What are you in
Yeah.
agreement with?
Yeah, I do. I do. That's one of the, I think, major structural changes that was made to the 01 standard that I think clarifies a lot of roles and responsibilities and makes it very clear that, as Lori said, it's not just top down, it's not just bottom up, it's across the entire organization. So there was a lot of attention, I think, given to how do we phrase this so that we're not perpetuating silo thinking, which is a bad thing, by the way, just in case you're confused. We don't like silos. So yeah, there are new clauses on asset management decision making. There's a whole new section on requirements for the strategic asset management plan, which was it was a little vague, and it's now much better defined. There's also an addition where the operational planning and control section now includes the fact that life cycle management is part of that. So not just thinking about an asset over the next, year or whatever. Think about it from the beginning to the end of its life cycle, because that really is how you determine the total cost of an asset, not just over the next year and not just what you paid for it initially. It's the entire life cycle. The original standard used the word risk to mean risk and opportunities, and now it's been clarified and divided into there are things that you need to do to address risks and things that you need to do to address opportunities. And then again, as Lori said, there's a much stronger emphasis on the role of leadership in supporting the success of an asset management system. So those are essentially
When we were first talking, Lori was mentioning the leadership factor in certification. How is that going to help you with the recertification? I think you said it's in 20, when are you going for recertification?
So we're doing recertification coming this March.
Okay.
And it's to the 2014 series because
right.
you have to let your external auditors get used to the standard. You have to have that area of transition to those who have had certification to 2014. So with that, I mean, our recertification will be to 2014. However, we are in the stages. We do have, I did create like a roadmap. I have communication slides. So My QA team, we have meetings, 2 to 3 meetings every day with different departments, highlighting the high level changes. You know, I started with top management. Now I'm working with all the individual work groups. This is what's coming. This is what's going on. As I'm performing internal audits to the 14, I'm still going to be looking at 2024. And if I see a gap against the new standard, I'm going to make that an opportunity for improvement. So that way you are going to put that opportunity for improvement in and be ready for that transition period. So we're doing around the house cleanup that way by communicating, by auditing. While we're auditing, we're teaching the knowledge of what's coming down the road. What do we need to impact and put into place? So I think we're on a good start. Because we have the same people. I'm not moving into a totally different environment. So it makes it a little bit easier. And then as we move the scope into a different avenue, you know, they'll be familiar with the 2024. So I think we're on a good realm of things.
Yeah.
Excellent.
Well, and to be perfectly fair, the auditing standards for the new standard aren't ready yet.
Correct.
They're just starting to work on the new auditing standards, and that's ISO 17021-5.
Yep.
I remember
That is it.
Chapter and verse.
chapter
Excellent.
and verse, yeah. And so that particular section of that standard is requirements for auditors who are auditing an asset management system. And they're just starting to revise that. So they're really not ready to certify to the 24 version yet because the auditors aren't ready. And so I think your approach is the right one, Lori. You're going to go ahead and recertify to 2014, but while you're in there, you're going to be looking at the 2024 standard and saying, what is there in here that we're already doing?
Right.
What is there in here that is a target of opportunity that we can do, bearing in mind we're not doing it yet, but we need to put it on the list before our next audit, because you recertify every 3 years, right?
Correct. And then we have their surveillance twice in between.
Yeah.
Yeah. So as I'm putting that into place, and the external auditor was to ask, oh, why did you change that? Continuous improvement.
Which has its own section in the
It is its own
in the
section
standard.
with continuous improvement. So yeah.
I apply that to my own personal life also.
So something else that happened in the 2024 standard, if you read the 2014 standard, every time you turned around, it would say, and you must document this. Not in those words, but everything was and documented information. And in this version of the standard, we all said, we don't need to say that every time we say anything. So there's a very high level. You have to document stuff, people.
Right.
And there's not, and with every shall statement, and you must document it.
Right.
Any other cleanup activities like that?
There is one that I'm slowly bringing into the organization. Coming from manufacturing, 9001, we are used to CAPA, corrective and preventative actions. When I came into this standard, it was nonconformities, corrective actions, and then you had a separate one of preventative. And when I got to the organization, they're like, oh, well, preventative, that's, you know, preventative maintenance. This is how we do the preventative. And so now it's like we have to retrain preventative. So you have your incident, you do your investigation, you do your root cause, and then from there you have your corrective actions. However, when you're done with the corrective actions, the preventative is the look across. Did you look across to see that this is not going to reoccur, not even in this place, but across the organization? Where else can I prevent this from happening someplace else? So it's another thought before you close out. Did I do my due diligence? Because that's also a risk factor. If I change something here, what could I potentially impact with this corrective action elsewhere? So I really need to look at my preventative. So I was really happy to see Kappa come into this standard. So that was that's a big one. And like I said, that's going to take a lot of training, a lot of hours of working on that.
And from that perspective, in the standard, that clause has been renamed from preventive action to predictive action. The idea being that we're not talking about greasing the bearings. That's okay, fine. That's preventive maintenance. You grease the bearings. Predictive action is just what you talked about, Lori. It's looking ahead and saying what could happen, and where do I need to be thinking about this, and what kinds of things could occur. So it's not just it's not just greasing the bearings, as I said, or checking the oil, or just the things that you do to keep your car on the road.
Right. And within ours, when it comes to the new predictive, which is the 10.3, they automatically think now predictive maintenance. We have preventative maintenance, we have predictive. No, 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 no. Everybody does predictive. We predict on the growth of where our businesses are at. We predict how much cash flow we need to for the success of our business. We are all doing predictive actions, but how are we documenting those predictive actions so that way we succeed into the future? So that's another new terminology. My slide actually has a crystal ball, like a genie, looking into the future. What are you predicting? We see a lot of, and that's the way I explain it. We see a lot of predictions within our management review meetings. We are predicting this. We need to do this. Those are your predictive actions. That's what 10.3 is. We are currently doing it. We just need to make sure we understand that we're doing it.
And there are also, you can understand some forms of predictive actions in terms of technology that's available now that wasn't available 10 years ago. For example, you can put vibration monitors on your machinery, and the vibration monitor can sit there and say, everything's fine. You don't even need to grease the bearings. They're fine. Or it can say, something funky is going on here, and you might want to take this machine offline and figure out why it's vibrating this way, because it shouldn't be. And so that is a predictive action that the machine hasn't failed. It's still working. But your monitoring now is telling you there's something going on, and I predict that if you don't do something, something bad will happen.
Right. So that's how the predictive runs in with the monitoring and measuring into that clause.
Right.
So it's kind of nice to show them the chain link of how everything goes together. I know when I mentioned to them also, the big wow was data and information. Oh my gosh, we got so much to do, and then what do they mean by knowledge? We do knowledge, we have training. Well, knowledge is just more than training. And I like the way it aligns with data and information. What are you doing with that information? How are you maintaining that information? But then also data and information. I have a chart on my slide that explains documented information. And then there's a dotted line. And these are your documents, such as your policies and procedures and work instructions. But then out of the documented information down here, these are your records. This is your data. This is all documented information. Even on my data, you need to have a retention on that. How long do you need to maintain that? And then you need to wash the tub, get rid of it. What does the regulatory say? So it also helps IT out on your systems of maintaining and keeping that, But we need to put some rules in place as far as data and on our data storage and things like that. So that's a big eye opener. I know within our organization, And so they're looking at that. They're looking at what are the rules? What are the storages? How long do we need to have this? You know,
Yeah.
we've been in business, you know, way back in the 1800s, you know, so we have so many old stuff. We need to clean house.
Yeah. Well,
This is
and
going so
from
good.
technology.
Do not feel restricted by time. I hope that both of you have more time. I'm loving this, so please keep going. If people have to sign off, thank you for joining us for the first half hour, but I've got questions and I don't think they're even done sharing all the fun stuff they want to share yet.
Well, I had two things I wanted to say from a technology perspective. Lori, the question that you just asked is both a bonus and a nightmare because to say, well, this category of data should be purged. Is the data categorized like that in our system, or is it just out there randomly?
Correct. Yep.
And if it's out there randomly, how the heck do I figure out what's the stuff that should be purged and what's the stuff that needs to be kept? Because I got to tell you, if IT purges the wrong stuff, heads roll.
Yep.
But you mentioned data and knowledge, and that was actually a quite vigorous discussion that we had in Philadelphia, the difference between data and information and knowledge, because those are three different things.
Yep.
If you take your data and you combine it in ways that are meaningful, now you may have information. And then if you take your information and you apply it to things that you need to know, now you may have knowledge. But data is not knowledge.
Right. And then
And
also,
data isn't information. Data is
how are you
just
maintaining that knowledge? So, such as me, how am I maintaining my knowledge that I'm giving to my organization? And then how do I update the information so that it's useful and get rid of the old knowledge? So looking at 2014 on ISO, how do my knowledge, explain to them, this is the new knowledge of ISO? And then how do I dispose of that and transition? So kind of the same way when it comes to your procedures. I like also within our layout in 6 on planning of changes, top management makes the decisions when it comes to planning of those decisions. However, on control of changes, which was management of change back then, now we're looking at the people down below making the decisions. So as you see top management planning and decision, you have us down here making decisions to come up. So that's where you can actually see it coming together.
Yeah. And a point I wanted to make when you said it's now control of changes and it used to be management of changes. Part of the reason for wording changes like that you see in the standard is because of the ability to translate things. So for example, in the US Technical Action Group, we've repeatedly said there's a difference between management of assets and asset management. In English there is, but not in any other language. In any other language, it's the exact same words. So how do you do that? And the change management is another one of those things. You could say change management, management of change.
Yeah.
As soon as you're outside of English, they're the same words.
But, and also, Lindsay, I know when we first started off, we have a department of organizational change. And then they take care of all the communication changes. They do all of that kind of stuff. And then all of a sudden we came in, we did, oh, we need to do MOC. Well, that's too much like our acronym. What is MOC? And when we started Googling, not having a whole lot of schooling, we're like, what is this? And then we had a contractor. Oh, well, these are just technical changes. So then we're explaining, okay, we only take technical changes. They take the rest of the changes. And so now I like how we have one control of change, which means everything across the organization is one, whether it's a technical change, it's a communication change, personnel change, whatever the change is, it's control of change and how are you managing all those changes of going through the organization.
So both of you had experience with the document. Lori was implementing it. Lindsay's been teaching it over and over again, so she like probably dreams about it. Um, there must be other people that were involved that were bringing their experience with how it had been used. Did you notice that people were expressing those lessons learned on how to improve it?
Oh, absolutely. And in the working group, of course, we have people literally from all over the world. We had people who were practitioners in like maybe at the engineering level, all the way up to the gentleman from Singapore, whose name always escapes me, is like the top government official in Singapore in charge of managing assets.
Wow.
And so it brings a very rich perspective to what you're trying to accomplish. And it really, I can't express enough how good that experience was and that process was. And yeah, we butted heads.
Yeah.
We did.
Mhm.
But as Lori said, then we came back in the morning and said, okay, so how do we resolve this? And we resolved it. Did we get 100% agreement on every single clause in the standard? Nope. But what we got was consensus. Is the standard perfect? No, nothing's perfect. There will probably be another revision in about 6 years.
Okay.
But it's as good as we could make it with the people that we had who were excellent, and with the time frame that we had, which was, I think they worked on it for 3 years. I was only involved in the last 2. So yeah, we had a lot of different people bring a lot of different things to the table, and that makes for a really good, rich experience in developing a standard like this.
I don't think we ever took a break from it. I mean, we
Yeah.
had our big long discussions, and then we would all go out to dinner and we still talked about it over here. The only time we took a break was when we were sleeping, and then
Yeah.
we were bright and early again and we were going at it again. So I don't think
You
we ever took a
forget
break.
that between the meetings and dinner, we also went across the street and had drinks.
Exactly.
Well, great. One of the questions I had was regarding the detail of the strategic asset management plan. In
Mhm.
55,001 from the 2014, it says your organization shall develop a strategic asset management plan that reflects the organization, the objectives of the organization.
And
That wasn't much. What is there now?
I can't quote you chapter and verse, but it gives you what that means, what all needs to be in your strategic asset management plan. And it also talks about the fact that you have to have asset management plans that support the SAMP.
Lori, was
So-
that part of your insistence, or?
Yeah, so looking at our strategic asset management plan, more or less you want to align it with what your company's mission, vision, and values are. And then as you're writing out the policy, of course, you want to make sure as you're writing the policy, those are incorporated in that. And then we take the policy, and then as we're doing, we want to make sure our objectives align with the mission and vision that's called out in the asset management policy. And then from there, you can kind of work your way slowly as you're building out your SAMP. But you got to take with one step at a time. First, you need to have that leadership buy-in. You need to understand what is the mission and vision of the company, and then from there, okay, I need you to sign off on this asset management policy. So I'm not, you're going to incorporate, you're going to stand by me, you're going to push this throughout the organization. And then once you have that, now start working on the smaller portions of the SAMP. Work with the individual departments and with top management. What objectives do you feel is beneficial for you to make decisions to help the asset management system? So then again, you want to have the buy-in from top management. Yes, these are the objectives. This is what we're looking for, making sure they're smart. And then implement that. So as you start, you'll start building your SAMP slowly. I know, like with our SAMP, you'll start maybe 16, 20 pages. I've seen some companies say, oh yeah, we don't review it for every, 5-10 years. We review ours every year and we update it. We just started with it. We're always changing the scope because we're moving it out. So we're constantly reviewing, we're constantly looking at different objectives when we clean them up and what needs to be done. So I would say once maybe get the full organization on board, then maybe I can look at a 5-10 year review and update. But right now we're doing it year by year by year. And there's nothing wrong with that. Nobody says it has to be 10 pages, 55 pages. It's up to the organization. That's the big thing you have to understand. ISO says it's up to the organization. It's not prescriptive, it's descriptive.
Excellent. And then Lori, you were talking about the predictive, and you had said earlier that you have one building that's certified. So if there was a problem in that building, which is certified, would that mean that you would then look at, it's just smart for an organization to then look at their other buildings? Is that what the implication is?
Oh yeah, most definitely. If there's something going on, I mean, I have 2 different facilities. They kind of run the same. So we have our steam generators. We have one at one facility and one at another, but only one certified. So predictive, you're looking at that. And let's say, like Lindsay had mentioned, we have RA cameras in there and we have such vibrations and things like that. So as we're looking and monitoring, and maybe, this one's a little bit older plant than this one, but maybe we need to take a look at, okay, how long has this been running? What are some of the issues? What's come up? Did something change cosmetically, maybe even in the water? We need to look at that and then take it back to the next plant and say, okay, how does the water look? Is the cosmetic in the water the same? Is it really just the aging of the plant? So we don't need to worry about it. So as you're predicting, you need to look at those. And it'll help you.
Excellent. Well, I think this has been an excellent team to present on the revisions of 55,001, because we've actually gained attendees through the course of the program. Nobody left and people have added. So thank you both. Do you either have closing statements or anything you want to say?
I can't think of anything. You, Laura?
Okay.
Yeah, if you have any questions, if you want to see any other videos as we were implementing the standard or more information on the standard, go to ISO.org, go to the TS 251. And once you click on that, there are several videos from people from all over the world who have helped put the information into 55,000 2024. I love those resources. I always hit IAM.org 251. Everything is there that you need. And then, of course, all of us are on LinkedIn. So you're more than welcome to hit any of us up on LinkedIn as well.
Absolutely. And I will say that if you want to have training on the 55,000 standards for people in your organization, we are offering revised training that covers the 2024 standards beginning in November. And we have now returned, we've been doing nothing but virtual training since the beginning of the pandemic, but we are now starting to do live on-site training as well. So please feel free to contact me if you have any interest in training your folks.
I will be glad to, and I'll even pass the word on to the state of Michigan, because I don't know if you knew, but the state of Michigan is implementing a Michigan statewide asset management. So working with the MIC, yes, I will
Michigan
pass that on to the
Infrastructure
other.
Council, we have featured frequently. It is something we're trying to get other states to replicate. The Department of Treasury realized they needed to bring this asset management information to all of the government entities, counties, cities, municipalities, townships, everyone. And it has the best training program that's available for free to the Michigan governments, and has a championship program, so people can
Correct.
be heralded as someone to be looked at in their organization as someone to promote this. And we've helped connect with Minnesota, and so Minnesota has had the Michigan Infrastructure Council present there, and when they presented to legislation, Minnesota passed legislation to start the process of developing the same thing that's going on, or similar thing that's going
Right.
on in Michigan.
Yeah, I
And-
heard Alaska's doing it now too.
Oh, excellent. I've got
So,
to
yeah.
find that one out.
Yeah, I have
Wonderful.
8 champions in the BWL from the MIC.
Oh, wonderful.
But that's one thing too, is to understand is it's the beginning and understanding of asset management. It's not going to tell you exactly, and it doesn't talk so much about ISO and 55,000 2024. So for that type of training and really wanting to understand what you need to do, yeah, I would really offer Lindsay's classes to a lot of our people, especially to, like, any others that I have going through my audit program and such to really understand it. I would really recommend going through Lindsay's portion. The MIC is outstanding, don't get me wrong. The readiness assessment that they got for, the company to take a look at they did a wonderful job putting everything together. I love being on the MIC committee. But for training of really understanding the nuts and bolts, you're best suited to go into with Lindsay's program.
Well,
Thank you,
I don't
Lori.
think we can end on anything better than that. So thank you so much, Lori. Thank you, Lindsay. Nick Rowan, you want to close us out with the typical closing?
Of course, yeah. Thanks to our speakers today and our attendees for sending some questions and keeping engaged in the chat. And thank you to our patron members, Jacobs, Mantech, Onuma, ABS Quality Evaluations, and CGI, as well as all our organizational members. And all those organizations out there like the MIC doing the good work. You may not be on this slide, but we are working together. And yeah, thanks, Mike Bordenero, ALN Executive Director, for always getting this together.
And the audience, again, thanks for being there, and we'll see you all next week.
All right.
Bye for now.
Thank you.
Bye.
Bye.